So I had a question in response to a video that I did a few weeks ago about Christian voting. And the question was this: God is sovereign, and what He wants to happen is going to happen, right? So why should a Christian vote? Let's talk about it. In Matthew 25, verses 14 through 30, we learn about the parable of the talents. I'm not going to read it, but I'll just briefly recap it. We learn that there's a master that's getting ready to go on a long trip, and he draws together 3 servants. The first servant, he gives 5 talents. The second servant, he gives 2 talents. And the last servant, he gives 1 talent. While the master's gone, the one with 5 talents works and multiplies 5 again. The one with 2 talents works and multiplies 2 again. But the one that has 1 talent doesn't work at all. He takes the talent and buries it and just gives it back to the master when he returns. Now this teaches us about 3 different types of servants. The one with 5 talents is the one that God has given blessing to, or the one that the master has given blessing to. This servant is one that the master can trust as faithful. The one with 2 talents is the one that the master has given provision to. He can trust this one. The 5 talent one has faithfulness. The 2 talent one has trustworthiness. But the one with the 1 talent is a test talent. And the master knew when he come back, when he saw that the one with 1 talent did not work at all, didn't multiply his blessing, and he called him slothful and lazy. So why did I mention this scripture in reference to voting? It's simple. The scripture teaches us there that we need to decide what kind of servant we're going to be. Are we going to take the provision and the blessings of God, which right now the blessing is the fact that we are allowed to vote in these, and we are provided the opportunity to vote in this? Or are we going to be like the 1 talent servant and not vote at all and just let it go because God's sovereign and what He wants to happen is going to happen, right? Well, God is sovereign, but His will is not always accomplished, because it says in His Word that it's His will that none should perish, but people perish every day. And I feel like we need to mention something here. It seems that people don't understand the difference between God's sovereignty and His ordinance. God ordains things that may not necessarily be in His will, because He can actually ordain our decisions. And what I mean by that is in 1 Samuel, when Israel was begging for a king, God finally gave in and gave them what they wanted. He ordained them. So what's the difference in between His sovereignty and His ordinance? His sovereignty is supreme power and authority in everything. But His ordinance is an ordering or officially decreeing something. So in the case of the Israelites, He ordered and officially decreed that they could have a king, even though it was against His will for them to have one. He gave them what they wanted. So we have to remember that that was not a failure of God's sovereignty, but it was an act of His ordinance. He turned them over to what they wanted. Just like in the New Testament, the book of Romans, where because of people's lusts, they turned away from what was natural. And it says that God turned them over to a reprobate mind. He officially decreed that they could operate in that mindset, even though it was against His will for them to do so. So why do I bring that scripture up? It's about choice. We have to choose whether we're going to be workers and doers of the word, or whether we're going to be slothful servants and get everything taken from us. And the choice is simple. We could either vote God's values, or we could not vote and allow other people to vote against God's values. And it's as simple as this. The vote is your witness. It is your voice in this election. But the person that uses God's sovereignty as an excuse not to vote is more than likely the same person that would use God's sovereignty as an excuse to not witness. And the Word tells us that judgment begins in the house of God. And I'm telling you, judgment is coming to God's house because God's house has turned to apathy instead of action. And we have used God's sovereignty as an excuse to do it. And I want to challenge you today. Take action. Vote God's values. And when we do this, we can assure that God's ordinances more closely align to His will for our lives. Either way, it's God's sovereignty and our obedience. And if we vote God's statutes, we'll owe the state and the federal government no apologies.